Rock art predates language, our ability to name, classify, describe, and effectively communicate with others. Aside from the figurative, the symbols found therein, asterisks, dots, half circles, lines, claviforms, crosshatches, spirals, triangles et al., may well prefigure the graphic systems used to develop the written word, enabling information to pass from one generation to the next. Speaking about the rock art of Europe, for example, Genevieve von Pitzinger makes the astounding observation that only 32 signs have been discovered throughout the entire continent over a 30,000-year period. The implication is that such marks were not random, but represent a complex system of communication, the meaning and purpose of which is subject to ongoing debate. What did these marks mean, and who was their intended audience? One might be tempted to think that our ancient ancestors were trying to tell us something, in the manner, say, of those tasked with developing future-proof warning labels for nuclear waste deposits, or those who sent messages into outer space on Voyager 1 and 2. We cannot say for sure. What we do know is that the emergence of rock art, or more broadly, marks and engravings on rock, signals a pivotal moment in the history of our species, running hand in hand with the realization that one thing can be used to represent another.
When you hear a word, you usually think of an image to go along with it. For example, if you hear the word hand, you might think of the image of a hand. But when you see a hand drawn or photographed, it becomes a more permanent image. In the same way, ancient people would take pigment and make an imprint on a rock to eternalize a hand image. Drawing or photographing a natural form such as a hand gives it a permanent place in the universe.
I found layers an incredibly compelling holding theme in terms of referring to the stratifications that sit under the skin of things, that accrue, that erode, that fold into each other. And stone has this capacity to store data, whether it's about its own formation or about the information that is inscribed in it, the cultural data. So working with rock art is a wonderful way of engaging the past. And while at first this may seem like an invitation to look at their insides that haven't been seen for hundreds of millions of years, there's also the sense that they are looking back at you and asking you to consider what it is that they have seen as they've lain on Earth for eons, beyond recorded time. And so all our yesterdays is also about stones as witnesses and about a universe that perhaps doesn't need a human witness.
I love the composition, the substances, the way the earth was stuck together and deformed and formed around that cradle of humankind, and especially around Nirox, because that's where I sometimes stay, so I can watch things. And I was just lying there in the farmer's, Mr. Somebody's farm on the side of the road. So we have a nice road right through to Sterkfontein from Nirox. And these things that are lying on the side of the road, we had a look at them, and some of them contain breccia. Breccia is the substance, the little bits of broken stone, and that were cemented together in history. They were cemented together to form the things from which many of the fossils can be scratched and dug, and if you break up some of these rocks, you will probably find some fossils.
You've got many ways to study rock art. You can approach it by technical ways, by taking a lot of pictures, by studying it, by ethnographic analogies, by the phylogeny of myths, and all these studies provide valuable information on a particular facet of some rock art traditions. Because all these sites are particularly difficult to access, we have to crawl, to bring heavy equipment. our team tried to reproduce the caves in 3 dimensions, so we can go back virtually whenever we want. I also have the chance to work on South African rock art, especially in the Drakensberg Park. But here as well, sites are really difficult to reach. Then I managed to go even a little bit further, trying to bring in my pocket the whole site, with all its iconographic details, all the volume and every crack on the rocky wall. For that, I take thousands and thousands of pictures. I put them in a software which recreates a giant 3D model. Then I can generate a huge and really accurate mosaic of all these pictures and study the paintings from my office in France.
Rock art informs us about the biodiversity and particular animals from each region in the past, but from a narrative perspective we can interpret some relevant forms of human-animal interactions and understand, for example, the complex and different processes that were conducted in the past for camelid domestication. In terms of locations, paintings were generally realized inside rock shelters of different sizes or just outside. Engravings were placed commonly in the face of rocky blocks. Geoglyphs cover hill slopes and achieve high visibility, although they can be found on flat surface, making them difficult to perceive.
Your first experiences of life, you are trying to orientate yourself to your world. So everything goes in your mouth. That's the first thing. Right? So then from there, it's about touch. So you touch everything. And so that kind of carries on, and then you are robust. You start tumbling around and touching your toes and doing all kinds of things. And then you want to leave a mark. You want to extend yourself beyond your own body. And you start leaving marks, and if you get hold of crayon or something, you're going to scribble all over the wall, over the floors. You're going to take sometimes babies, their feces, and they will actually make lines with it. So it's been from the dawn of being human and consciousness, I would imagine, that we've wanted to leave marks behind. And that's obviously one of the reasons why man has left their marks, sometimes consciously and sometimes less so. So for me, the idea of rock art, that's one inclination, I would imagine. I'm not an expert in rock art, but that's just what I think. And then obviously the idea of communicating with others, whether you are shaman, whether your role within a particular community is about communicating ideas, you've been given some messages or you've dreamt them. How do you communicate that? Sometimes by words, but sometimes you need to kind of leave them off. Or sometimes it's a direct interpretation of an idea, or if it's subconscious, if it's meditative.
En los mitos de todos estos grupos ven en el jaguar la figura muy sagrada de este animal que es el dueño de todos los animales, que vive en esta maloca donde el Padre Sol aparece montado en su canoa cósmica, que es la Vía Láctea, con su báculo, buscando el sitio más propicio para dar inicio y origen a los hombres, a los animales, a las plantas y a todos los elementos que conocemos. Y en ese primer hueco, hecho con la presión de su báculo sobre la superficie de la tierra, bota su poder seminal para poder crear y hacer la procreación energética más importante que da como resultado del nacimiento de una primera creación que es la luna. Y el sol tiene relaciones incestuosas con ella. De ese acto sexual del sol con la luna nace una criatura que es ni más ni menos que el jaguar. Por eso los jaguares son amarillos, o sea, solares por encima, y blancos o lunares por debajo.
I'm saying about how quickly I'm able to look at images, right? Like how quickly I've realized now how quickly I can read them. It concerns me sometimes, you know, where it's like this, and I'm like hardly looking, and I'm just like couple of seconds. But I think there's something that holds me a little bit longer when I don't know and I need to figure it out. I think this even happens in real life, you know, when you see something but you're not sure what you see, it kind of makes you want to sort of look a bit closer and be like, whoa, what is actually going on? I think I'm way more interested in that. I think that holds me a bit longer than like seeing something and reading it and going, you know, yeah, I'm way more interested in that stuff that I might not understand. I'm more interested in that space that there is between me and getting the thing and making sense of it, defining it, knowing it in certain ways. I don't know. Trying to understand what language does in that whole identity making and culture thing. And maybe to try and like capture that experience of like, you know, trying to read a language that you don't understand. Where that gap is, where you recognize text and you recognize writing, you could, you know, there's a specific format, there's a specific sort of quality about this thing that reminds you of text. There's a level of like it being familiar but also strange at the same time. But it's that gap for me that's really interesting, where you just, there's just, I suppose, just space between you and the thing, and you can't like make it up. I find that really interesting. I think that's a very interesting generative space. But yeah, I mean, I think there's that as well. There's a sense that like, in a similar fashion, like that kind of gap that we experience in sort of language potentially, or in abstraction, so to speak, is like, I guess maybe the element of time there, insofar as rock art is concerned, right? If you want to talk about its potential romanticization, probably, yeah, very observable romanticization. There's just a gap, and maybe I'm like not really interested also in sort of making it intelligible. I think it's kind of a, I hate to say it in like a really binary way, you know, to say that it's Western or whatever as a sort of philosophical or just the way of viewing the world, of wanting to sort of make definitions and understand something within a very specific set of ways of knowing it. But I think, yeah, I don't know, there's like space for us not to, potentially, to like not know the thing and to just let it be, in a way, to let it be its own thing, to let it behave how it behaves, which is something I've been saying a lot about, like how I want to treat the pigment that I'm using.
My research is especially focused in the artistic process of rock art itself. This is to say, I try to reconstruct the rock art, analyzing the archaeological remains related with artistic creation and by means of a controlled experimental approach. The aim is to better know the complexity of the whole processes related with this activity and to calculate the social investment in order to specify the role of rock art in prehistoric societies. Rock art is one of the most striking legacy in prehistoric Spain. Hundreds of caves, rock shelters, and open-air sites were decorated along the whole territory. It is noteworthy the case of the cave of Altamira because it was the first one discovered in 1879. But also all northern Spain has the biggest density of Paleolithic art worldwide. On the other side, the Mediterranean region is well known by the post-Paleolithic paintings and rock shelters. All this unique heritage is recognized by the UNESCO as World Heritage.
This is a variety of places where you can find rock art in this place. Walls, little holes. Sometimes rock art is very small, like a couple of centimeters, and sometimes in some kind of shelters, and only very special, only in one or two situations, we have engravings on boulders. The most important thing that is represented in the whole area are the llamas, because llamas were the center of the economy of these people. They are painted in every position, in every situation, and everywhere. Also, for this period, we have representations of battles, men with arms facing each other with bows and arrows, in very confrontative.
Today, studying rock art is very relevant because not only do we come from it, but because it has saved us by bringing us to this precise moment and recreates us on the planet as an intelligent species. The 4 regions that I have studied present a series of very important examples of what has been said. The first is the association between anthropomorphs and zoomorphs with 3 fingers or phalanges and rectilinear or quadrangular figures, such as the sites of Durango, Mexico, Cueva Pinta, border with Chihuahua, Sinaloa, Cerro El Cochi, and Puebla, Tejalpa. This association is possibly the expression of a code that is integrated into the Yutnahua or Yudo-Aztecan linguistic trunk. The last element is the representation of Hopi women from the southwestern United States with butterfly or side bun hairstyles, and its influence or fashion for this form of hairstyle is clear because it appears both at the Rincon de los Apaches site in Chihuahua and in San Pablo Amaltepec in Puebla, both in Mexico. The latest discoveries made by our research in the south of Puebla, in the Tejalpa site and in the Sierra Norte of Puebla, are rather surprising, since the representation of the cactus called peyote, Lophophora williamsi, has been verified both in painting and in engraving on rocky surfaces from sites such as Cueva de los Muncos and Monticelli Huaytamilco, the latter with a peyote represented with one of its segments bitten off. Peyote contains mescaline, a psychotropic substance that has been traditionally used since ancient times in religious and healing ceremonies by indigenous groups in the southwestern United States and western and northern Mexico. In Chihuahua, for example, there are 2 very important sites with cave paintings of peyotes represented in profile and in plan. This is the case of Cueva de las Monas and Canada El Café, with one of its peyotes bitten as well.
Like many researchers working in this field, I believe it's highly likely that the geometric patterns that we see in early human rock art from around the world are physical transcriptions of visual hallucinations experienced in a state of trance. I'm interested in the idea of extended cognition, that thinking is not something that happens in the brain, that thinking extends out through the body into the material substance of the world and back, in a constantly evolving reciprocal process. We transform materials, and the materials transform us in return. The concave marks in Changing My Mind were made in an attempt to describe a grid of points using a hammer and punch with my eyes closed. Looking at the indentations in the work now, it seems as though the fingertips of my mind have pressed into the surface of the stone, an echo of our ancestors and the emergence of human consciousness as we know it today. The hand has enabled the mind to manifest in the world and has led us to where we are now. We're hybridized with our technologies, we inhabit virtual realities, and we could be on the brink of developing artificial intelligence that exceeds our own. Evolution moves through us like an invisible wave.
I'm so curious about the way each one of these elements works against the surface of the other, and how they add more meaning and more history and memory to each other. So in the way that the water carries the rust into the surface of the stone, and the rust is created because the water or the moisture is on the surface of the steel. So the cycle transfers from the water, from the rust to the water, from the water to the stone, and the element of iron lives in relation to the stone. We find it in the ground, perhaps not in the marble, but it is a relative of that marble. So there's something cyclical happening there. And then there's also a beauty in the way that they rub against each other and over time cause patina and polish. And I think in the way that these three works in this set, Reverence 1, 2 and 3, are a homage to those elements, and also a memory of everything that lives, because everything lives.
It goes without saying that the scale of urbanization, agriculture, industrialization, etc. would not have been possible without a language or system such as rock art, around which ideas could be expressed, preserved, bettered. In this way, the study of rock art provides crucial insights, not only into the world of our ancestors, but our present and future,